to wish a good morning and a welcome to everybody here for joining Peaceful Change Initiative's online discussion to present our latest case study, Strengthening Media as a Stakeholder in Peacebuilding, and showcasing our experiences in fostering collaboration among media organizations in Kosovo. We have 4 speakers here, but there will be plenty of time for all the participants to have their say. What I would like to do is first is to ask Richard LeVay, Head of Internal Politics and Communication at the UK Embassy in Kosovo, for his introductory statement. Mr. LeVay, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can I just first check if people can hear me okay? Because
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you okay.
Boring technical
You're
issues.
You're a bit distant from the camera, but we can live with that. We hear you very well.
You're not missing too much. Okay. Thanks very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today, speak on behalf of the Embassy, so the UK and the region, and just to briefly talk about kind of why I think this is important and some of the work we've been doing up until now supporting independent media. First of all, I think I should say we're really pleased that we've been working with Peaceful Change Initiative for around 4 years, if I'm not mistaken, with the aim of supporting local partners and agents of change across ethnic divides to influence more effective public service delivery, create conditions for sustainable in Kosovo and in Serbia. It's been a joint project between 2 embassies. Obviously, this is difficult work, and particularly from a distance, it can be quite frustrating when we see high politics as stuck as they are, and such a prolonged security crisis, in particular in the north of Kosovo last year, kind of at the macro level. But I think it's fair to say without efforts at the ground level to create more of a common understanding of facts on the ground, things will certainly be even worse. And it's really important to keep patience with these kind of long-term efforts at change. Another long-term area of programme work for us that has been something that's more familiar to me has been our work to support independent media in Kosovo and in the region. We've done this through a number of programs. Some of these interventions have included providing training to young journalists on personal safety and information integrity. We've also done a lot of work to bring in the Western Balkans region into the Open Information Partnership. For those of you who don't know, that was something that was established in Eastern Europe, and it brings together over 20 countries now, and it's a coalition of investigative journalists, charities, think tanks, academics, NGOs, and fact checkers to counter, identify, and expose hostile disinformation. So that was really important to bring the Western Balkans into that. But my favourite project on our British Council implemented project called Media for All, which had a real focus on some of the local independent outlets that we're working with today. And if I'm not mistaken, 3 of the 4 outlets covered in your case study, which is it's really pleasing to see. The idea of this project was to support local media to ensure that their businesses were sustainable at such a difficult time, with the project starting around the COVID pandemic, and also to ensure that about the issues that mattered to local people. And as a byproduct of this, given we're focused on local media, that also enabled us to support a lot of minority media, including for Serbian, Bosniak, Turkish, and Roma-speaking audiences here in Kosovo. And it was a similar story in other countries in the region too, where the project was active. And I'm also really pleased to say that as of this month, we're now working again with the British Council and Thomson Reuters Foundation to offer a new round of grants, this time with a slightly different focus aimed at business innovation and generating new, more engaging content. But I think the point I'd like to make is that often, as is often the case in government and among big donors, the 2 strands of work I've mentioned here, so the reconciliation and the support to media, were carried out by 2 different teams with different funding streams. And as much as we talk to each other a lot in a very small open plan embassy, it's inevitable that we don't spot all of the opportunities between the different areas of our work. So I think that's the main reason why I was so intrigued by this project, the Peaceful Change Initiative, and the case study that you're going to hear about today, which is about PCI's efforts to convene a partnership among media, drawing out lessons, the ways in which international support can help independent media achieve a greater impact on areas such as democratization, inter-communal relationships, and peace building. Often the focus of support from the UK and other international donors has mostly been about ensuring that minority groups have access to fact-checked information in their own language and about the issues that matter to them. But looking at some of the recommendations we're going to hear about today, I think it's right to ask whether we can perhaps be more ambitious and start thinking about bringing some of these kind of separate information spaces more closely together. I'm particularly interested to hear the insights from Gorazdevac Media Group, who have been one of our beneficiaries in the past, about their cooperation with Radio Player and what we can learn going forward. And with that, I'll leave it to you guys to talk about the presentation.
Thank you very much, Richard. Let us move on now and give the word to Ian Bancroft, who's the project manager of the ALVED project for Peaceful Change Initiative. And as in that position, he oversaw the project, including the cooperation between the Gorazdevac Media Group and their partners. Ian, go ahead, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Nenad. I'm hopefully going to talk for 12 to 15 minutes, but if I threaten to go over that, I'll ask Nenad to rudely cut me off.
No need to worry. No need to worry. I shall.
You're well skilled at that, well drilled. First, a big thanks to the British Embassy, the UK government, not just for funding this initiative, but for the approach, the adaptive management that allowed us to set up initiatives in a way that supports learning and reflection. Things that work, we can put more resources into. Things that didn't quite work as we hoped, we can reflect upon them and either try to do them differently or to scrap them all together. And I think this has allowed us to produce a case study with a great deal of reflection. We've tried to be open, we've tried to be honest. We hang out some of the dirty laundry at the same time. And I hope that this discussion continues to contribute to that sort of debate. We have a number of case studies coming in the coming weeks that we hope will be of interest to you. For instance, one is about work that we did with Agon Islami, who's on this call, on the census in South Serbia, and with the census ahead in Kosovo. I think those are important lessons to learn. What we wanted to learn from this case study, however, is what do people and organizations want from partnerships? Partnerships, whether between communities or across countries, are always considered important, but it is rarely specified what it is they want to get from the partnership. What needs do they fulfill for those who are engaged in a partner? Now, donors, of course, value partnerships. Again, the purpose, though, can be underspecified. One quote from some of the research that we undertook captures this cynicism that results. Less support is given for issues that are more important, and more is given for projects that aim to show that Svetlana and Hassan are friends. Now, this is not to underestimate the symbolism of people working together across those traditional lines of division. It shouldn't be trivialized. They can and do inspire others to reach out and do the same. But a partnership like the one that we've described and initiated, and the specific benefits it has offered, have very real impacts on peace-building objectives. First and foremost, they can affect behaviors, they can affect attitudes. From meetings in cross-community formats, it was clear that there were a lot of situations where certain pieces of news would be word on the street in one community, whereas another community didn't know anything about that specific instance. And this separated communication space, as Richard spoke about, is further compounded by, of course, the language differences that we have in Kosovo. And this not knowing what is happening in other communities can have very serious consequences. Not only a lack of empathy within and between communities, but even worse, an assumption of bad faith, that people from other communities are simply not interested in what is going on day to day in other communities. And so filling this communication gap is something that we at PCI felt international peace-building projects can usefully do. And we hope that this case study that you have in front of you, and that hopefully many of you have had the chance to read, will lay out some very tangible lessons for how such partnerships can be initiated, and some of the difficulties and where they can lead to. So this partnership was spearheaded by Radio Gorazdevac, and you'll have the pleasure of listening to Darko later on in the call, provided I give him enough time to talk, in partnership with Radio Player, Radio Astra, and TV Prizreni, with PCI providing grants to incentivize their cooperation. Now, nothing was prescribed from the point of view of objectives. There were no specific themes or approaches that we dictated, only specific quantitative targets about dissemination, about content, etc. There was no editorial control. We were not insisting upon certain messages to be disseminated at the local level. What there was an emphasis on exploring how the partnership can best evolve to suit the respective needs of the particular partners. And now these are very varied partners, not by design of PCI, but by choice of Darko and Radio Grazdovac. They had different institutional models. Some are NGOs, some are commercial media. They have different target groups. Some focus on towns, some focus on specific ethnic communities. They have differing social objectives, and they also use different media, TV, radio, digital, etc. So did collaboration happen? And did the partners add value to one another's core businesses? The case study describes some teething problems on the outset. But when we did see collaboration eventually materialize, we see the contribution of collaboration to the respective approaches. Most of the cooperation was on dissemination, but there was also cooperation on information gathering and joint production. There was not many cases where news ideas were jointly conceptualized or partners take one another's leads. We'll deal with that a little bit more later on. What I think was the highlight of the cooperation of the partnership was joint production. It entailed cooperation at the early stages, jointly developing the concept, jointly gathering information, jointly producing the items, and then each disseminating and promoting it. To a certain extent, this filled some of the language gap problems that we identified. 75% of the joint items were distributed in 2 languages. More, we notice, from Albanian to Serbian than the other way around. Sensitive things, however, did not get carried and did not get addressed in the joint productions. In part, this can be attributed to the relative youth of the partnership that we established. It takes time to build trust and rapport, to know one another's stances on particular issues, and to feel comfortable with going out into the world and taking a common stance on contentious issues. And of course, this partnership happened at a time of great upheaval, particularly in the north of Kosovo. Now, whilst this could have been seen as an opportunity to get a balanced and multidimensional coverage of what was going on, it also meant that there were very high levels of tension, and there were concerns that getting it wrong would lead to a backlash that could have damaging consequences, not only for the individual media outlets, of course, but for the partnerships itself. But with respect to the notions of positive peace that we try to employ in our work, we did note that the initiative provided more information to minorities about the work of local governance. It gave more coverage about the priorities of minority communities to the majority community. There were joint articles that looked at communal issues that were relevant to all communities, relevant to the welfare of citizens in their daily lives. And 2 of the articles focused on more structural issues, violence against women and youth participation. Since the end of our support, the partnership model has lived on, with the partners making adjustments to focus on what has worked well for them. Their status has increased. Radio Grazdovac, for instance, enjoys more hits, and Astra has also grown its online presence. Many, in fact, almost half of the items produced for this partnership were picked up by other media, further raising the prominence of the individual partners. Now, from the outset, the collaboration didn't start straight away. There was a sort of gestation period. 20% of the initial items didn't involve any collaboration at all. There may have been an opportunity to deal with specific themes without prescribing content, to have a more explicit focus, for instance, on gender and community level perspectives. So these are important points contained within the case study that those of you who want to try to replicate this model or engage with it will hopefully find useful and pertinent for your own experiences. Now, in terms of key learnings, in the case of independent media, there's a clear will to work together that is genuine and should be built upon. What they might need help with is to really focus on the value added that each partner brings to the partnership. Secondly, basing monitoring around processes and being flexible with targets, whilst looking light touch in approach, helps highlight learning, which we still need. and avoids the purely artificial outputs. The partners were very clearly focused on quality and not purely ticking the box in terms of jointly producing quantity that fulfilled certain quantitative objectives. And I think the joint production element of this is really a positive sign for the future. Partnerships, however, like this will not fully fill the language gap. There's still a need for media organizations to have in-house capability to work with both languages professionally, and donors need to be attentive to how project budgets take this into account. On that front, local independent media need to be seen as a partner, a part of the development environment, not purely as a service delivery channel. If local media thrives, the environment for democratic development is enhanced. Therefore, donors should give very serious consideration to providing sustained funding to independent media in the localities where they work. Such core funding that can allow media to retain staff, invest in themselves, grow, instead of funding that is assignment-based to write on themes or promote particular projects. And it would be interesting to hear from the panel and from the audience what the feasibility of something like this could be and what simultaneous concerns there are. These partnerships should also be viewed as long-term investments if they are to address drivers of conflict. The practices that I've outlined of cooperation need to be developed further. There needs to be better understanding of one another's priorities. Obviously, trust and the understanding of the realization of the good intentions of each partner need to be developed, and certain sensitivities need to be understood from within the respective communities and not just assumed. As I said before, we saw a certain degree of conflict avoidance and self-censorship, which a process-based monitoring system might be able to understand with a view to broadening the space of what is possible without causing harm to the partnership. But I think it's clear that the media partnerships can play a role in contributing to peace building, and we hope that the case study that we presented to you provides some useful tips and clues as to how that can be achieved. So I look forward to hearing more from our discussants and to welcoming your questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. You saved 2 minutes. So that's very good. That's 2 minutes more we'll have for the discussion. Next, I'd like to introduce Darko Dimitrijevic, the alpha and the omega of the Goraždevec Media Group, who sort of initiated this kind of a partnership and led it. We'd love to hear your experiences. Darko, for you and the other speakers, the limit is 5 minutes, but you'll have plenty of time later on to add whatever else you want and answer any questions that will be coming from the floor. Darko, please go ahead.
Warm regards for all participants from Goraždevec. Thank you for opportunity to presenting this media coalition and our job. First of all, I like to thanks to PCI, you, Nenad, and UK Embassy to give us opportunity to learn very important lessons to learning from self-mistake. First of all, I have to say that at the beginning of our cooperation with other media partners is not going everything so easy. Not everything went as it should. There were a lot of problems we have at the beginning. The task of creating a media team of 4 media from different communities, different language, still sounds like something impossible today. However, we succeeded in that way. What I was particularly dissatisfied with was communication between partners. Articles in the beginning that were not fully processed. Our communication it's be very at very less level, and we have a similar organization problem. I was a period that did not promise much. However, we managed to learn some important lessons from PCA. PCA helped us in that way with his experience, and cooperation between partners, Radio PEA, Radio Astra, and TV Prizreni is completely new experience for Gorazdevac Media Group and Radio Gorazdevac. I say communication is not be very good at the beginning. Now is excellent. We coming from different newsroom. We use different language. We have a translation problem at the beginning, and it's not clear how to achieve a set of goals. But also the role of Radio Gorazdevac as the leader of this coalition at the beginning for myself is not be very clear. Fortunately, PCA see that in shortcoming times and with its experience contributed to improve it, to learn us how to learn it from our mistakes, from all mistakes in communication. And in very short period, after maybe 4 or 5 months, we try to second dimension of this cooperation, very successful exchange content and create a very successful story. In my opinion, it's very successful results from this activity. This project is that we create after this initiative one very important media coalition, Voice of the Community, that is a direct result of ALVED project. Based on the acquired experience and praxis, we continue to work and cooperate. And so today, Gorazdevac Media Group has developed 2 inter-ethnic coalition. First is be a Voice of the Communities. Ian also mentioned that is coalition Radio Gorazdevac, Radio PEA, Radio Astra, and TV Prizreni. And now we have second coalition with also included Radio PEA and young volunteers from Bosniak communities in Kosovo, and we work in media literacy field. Also, I see that is very important to invest in other capacity in addition to programming. So it's necessary to organize training for journalists from time to time, especially in this specific field, cooperation between journalists from different communities. That is very, very important in that time where we have very, very bad inter-ethnic relation in Kosovo, and I see very important role by local and minority media in that process to be improved. I also open for question maybe in the next time.
Thank you very much, Darko. I had the feeling that you were going to run on for a couple of more minutes, but you were very respectful of the time constraints. Thank you very much for that, and you will be in a position to tell us a bit more details. I've got a number of questions actually relating to this kind of cooperation. Let us move on. If I can ask now Julieta Jombalai, who's the project management specialist for democracy and governance with the USAID office in Pristina. Julieta, please go ahead.
Hello everyone. Well, I didn't expect to be nervous, and I have notes, but
there's absolutely no reason to be nervous. I mean,
full. It's so many people, some of which I know and some I don't, and I'm so happy to meet some of you virtually. Darko, I've heard so much about you, but we haven't had, unfortunately, the chance to meet each other. I'm with USAID Kosovo. I have been for years now, and same as other donor organizations, USAID as well recognizes the role of the media when it comes to democratization and development. So the approach we have is multi-sectoral, and through different activities, we are trying to support what is important for democratization development, and which is what you, I think, already mentioned. By now, it's amplifying independent voices and bridging divide between communities and different sectors as well. We have here at USAID a number of activities that work with media outlets or media associations or directly with the journalists. So we have a different bit of trying to tackle issues from different sides. And I'm happy to see that colleague from NDI is here, because I really wanted to mention first to start with the NDI activity. National Democratic Institute is in Kosovo for years, and you that are here at this call from Kosovo, you most probably heard of them and know about NDI. What NDI has been working on for years is political parties at parliament. But I don't know how many of you know about the NDI's work when it comes to a third component, which is very important when it comes to reaching out to right people, and that is working on disinformation. And they are working on this issue in cooperation with civil society activists and media and different politicians. They organize annual conferences because it's very important for practitioners to get together. In the case study, I read that Goraždevac and its partners recognized that their audience want to know more about women and youth. And this is exactly what the findings of NDIs have shown to be, that there is not so much of reporting when it comes to gender-sensitive reporting or youth-sensitive reporting. And youth is a group of population that is very important. US media practitioners, you know more about it than I would. I can only share with you what I read and what I heard and what I hear from our partners. Youth, and why I'm mentioning youth as now I've changed my presentation is because Ian mentioned earlier the case of Svetlana and someone, the other guy, Albanian Hassan, that people talk about or report about. But what we see in the news, is usually the stories of the older generation, how they are still friends. But we don't see enough of stories of young youth from Kosovo, Albania, and Kosovo Serbs talking and working together. And through our reconciliation activity that is being implemented by the community building from Mitrovica, they work with youth. And this is another approach that we have, working directly with youth at the communities, at different communities throughout Kosovo, interethnic communities. And these youth get trained together and get to know each other. And as well, now they are using podcasts more and more. And this is another media source that is being used, social media and podcasts, by a different category of people, not my generation, which apparently we go more to the TV. And this is another thing that I think it's worth of mentioning, because, and it's in line what PCI's activity it's been working on, trying to reach out to the right audience. I have seen that Radio Goraždevac has partners with Radio Peja, but as well with the TV station and different station in Prizren region. So being present at different regions is really important, and trying to spread the news, from bottom up. And we are doing this with reconciliation activity implemented by CPM, while NDI is more focused on the central level and working with the press council on coming on the new media literacy strategy. They are working on it. The other activity that I would like to share with you, maybe you already know about it, but has a very strong partnership component, just as your project had. And that is a regional media assistance activity that is implemented by Internews. And throughout the region, they have different partners. But I have been glad to see that in Kosovo case, the Kosovo partners have been cooperating together. We have Koha and Kosev that have signed MOU, and now they are sharing each other contents. Furthermore, it is important to this partnership has been more important because it is something that now it helps them as well increase the outreach. And just in 2023, Koha has had around more than 1 million of people that check their website in Serbian language. And this is thanks to the translation tool that Darko mentioned earlier. So these new gadgets or how to call them? I'm an older generation, but the translation tools, the applications, the technology, all of this is really helping. So thank you. I'm here for questions.
Thank you very much. Your time has run out, but only for now. You'll have an opportunity to continue later. Can I just ask you, even though it's too early for question time, but you've mentioned a number of activities that USAID is engaged in. Reading the case study and sort of joining this conversation, does that inspire USAID in Kosovo to sort of look at partnerships like the one that the Gorazdevac Media Group has been engaged in? Just very briefly.
Well, we do have already partnerships, as I mentioned, like Koha and Kosev.
Yes, we heard, but Koha and Kosev are
not
Koha
something
and Kosev
that we
are really
but
big media organizations. I was thinking about smaller ones like
we can promote partnerships, but at this point we don't have a bilateral media activity, so we are working through our partners, and many of our partners, implementing partners, because we are a donor organization, they always encourage partnerships and working with other groups. So definitely something like this is something that I can share with my colleagues, and something that we see if we are doing it right. But this example has definitely been a very good example, especially because they have done joint productions. So something that I can share with the others that we are working with and see how that goes.
Thank you very much. And I will ask now the other big partner, apart from USAID, the EU office in Kosovo is certainly probably certainly one of the largest ones, possibly the largest one in Kosovo. Ariana Chaka, who's the Civil Society and Media Program Assistant with the EU office, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Nenad. Indeed, we are, the biggest donor in Kosovo. Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to meet you, even though it's online, but I would love to meet especially media representatives whom I haven't met yet in person as well. It was a pleasure to read the case study, Strengthening Media as a Stakeholder in Peacebuilding, which is a great example of how partnerships among media organizations in Kosovo can be beneficial for media outlets and for their audiences as well. So I will highlight some takeaways from reading this case study, and then I will talk a little bit about what we as the EU office in Kosovo are doing in this regard, and how maybe this study will inspire us to work a little bit more on this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the collaboration among Radio Gorazdevac, Radio Peja, Radio Astra, and TV Prizreni stands as a notable example of media cooperation across 3 languages and different geographies as well, even though Kosovo is a small country, I must say so, but it is indeed impressive, notwithstanding actually some challenges in several aspects of partnership management, as were highlighted in the study itself. So for me, establishing a joint editorial office emerges as an excellent strategy, actually, to consolidate resources and expertise, promote sustainable collaboration, and streamline content production across different media organizations that were part of this partnership. Addressing the issue of multilingualism in media is crucial, and that has been pointed out several times in this call today, but in many other discussions that we have. It is crucial to ensure that all communities in Kosovo receive the same information and not interpretations of that information. As a former journalist myself, I am not surprised to have read in the case study that actually local news stories have increased the audience of the partners. So these stories are directly linked to the everyday life of citizens, and they are vital for maintaining an informed and connected community. These local stories contribute to civic engagement, public awareness, and a sense of shared identity, ultimately fostering a healthier and more vibrant local environment. Therefore, I'm delighted to observe that all partners actively have participated in this collaboration. And as Darko said, dialogue and communication among them appear to have been vital elements in sustaining momentum. While reading the case study, I noted a common problem that media in Kosovo have. Gorazdevac Media Group recently re-registered as a CSO to qualify for grant applications. As the largest donor in Kosovo, we have already taken note of this development. In our grants, we explicitly emphasize that it is important for lead applicants to have sub-grants for other media, especially local media, which can be other CSOs or private businesses. So not to discriminate, of course, those media that are registered as private or commercial businesses. Seeing how a small grant of 20,000 euros contributed to promoting freedom of expression motivates us as donors to look into this modality more closely. We have been supporting the media sector in Kosovo for quite a long time now, and I can tell you that we have many national and regional projects that have been completed successfully, but of course several are ongoing as well. So we have been supporting investigative reporting, fact-checking initiatives, and programs that promote responsible and constructive journalism practices. I would like to emphasize our recent study that we had with Bern actually on disinformation, the story of our lives. Of course, that when we talk about media nowadays, disinformation, fake news, malinformation are concepts that go without saying. So this study has identified more than 300 instances of potentially false or misleading news just during October 22 to April 23. So you can imagine their impact on significantly maybe influencing public opinion in Kosovo. We have other projects as well that are targeted to diversifying voices in journalism. We have regional projects that are focused on our public broadcaster here in Kosovo, but also collaboration between different media outlets in the region and so on. We also have another interesting instrument, I would say. It's through the European Endowment for Democracy, ED, that not only supports media outlets, be them private or CSOs, but also individual journalists or activists to achieving better results in different fields such as democracy development, peace building, journalism initiatives, documentaries, I don't know, whatever an activist wants to pursue. Therefore, seeing how our projects are contributing quite a lot to specific fields in media development, we will keep supporting media outlets. And currently, by the way, we have an open call for proposals that tackles media resilience and pluralism, media literacy, and improved access to information. And of course, as I said earlier, applicants must propose financial support to third parties. So here, local media come into play. And even though our collaboration with them is not as structured as it was here in the case study, at least we want to hear different voices, and therefore we have made it as a requirement that all lead applicants must foresee financial support to local media coming from different communities, backgrounds, with different modalities of work and so on and so forth. So I would gladly answer any questions that you have in this regard, and thank you very much once again, and congratulations on the great work that has been done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariana. We will now open the floor, and can I urge everybody please to type your questions or comments indeed in the chat. You can also raise your hand and ask for your microphone to be unmuted. We're especially interested in hearing the opinions and impressions of the other donors or potential donors who are attending this presentation today, to hear their comments on what they have seen, what they have heard so far. Looking left, looking right. I do not see any raised hands.
Joanna's raising her
yes.
physical hand.
Yes, I can see. The physical hand is
Is
probably
also
more
accepted.
important than the electronic one.
You
Joanna,
need to
please
have
go
your
ahead.
camera on
Thank you
there.
very much.
Hi, hello everybody. It's great to see
We hear you very badly. If you can sort of come closer to the micro, you're probably using the internal microphone on the laptop. So if you can just come closer.
do that. I'll just shout louder. Hi everybody, can you hear me now?
Faintly, but yes.
It's great to see you, or many of you again. I was the former head of New Perspectiva, and of course we worked on so many of these issues right from the start of our work, before anybody else had thought of words like partnership. We just looked for journalists, and this is what jumps off the page for me in your discussions today. There's so much talk about ethnicity. You're talking about Serbs, you're talking about Albanians, you're talking about Turks, you're talking about Roma. You're not talking very much about looking for journalists. Do you think this makes a difference? Do you think we push too much on the ethnicity side? Because each time you mention that you want a Serb or you want an Albanian or you need the translation, which I can understand, you reinforce the ethnicity and not the profession. And recently somebody called John Snow in England has written a really interesting book about his experiences in media. He was on Channel 4, and I'd advise everybody to read it. And he says how important it is for the journalist teams to reflect society. So not only people of different national backgrounds, but it includes in that disabled people, LGBT, and so on. So I think we need to think about the language and the narrative we use. And Ian, you mentioned that in the report it says that other media took up some of the work that had been done. Was there any specificity about the type of articles or the type of presentations they picked up? Were there specific things they were interested in which perhaps they didn't do? Because we had the same thing with New Perspectiva, and what I found was they always tended to pick up on the very ethnic issues or the articles written by Serbs, I'm sorry to say it, in the sense that they're written by Serbs, purely because they didn't have the guys in their teams. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Bit faint, but I think we got the gist, and I think you're raising a couple of very important questions. On the ethnicity issue, can I just say, for example, that in my time as a journalist, I always said that my ethnicity is journalist. Not this or that country, nation, or whatever, but I believe that I belong to the nation of journalists whilst I was a journalism. On the other hand, Kosovo is very specific in the sense that the two ethnic groups have two very different languages. So it's not necessarily an issue that ethnicity is out there in the front, but the language is out there in the front, and language then again is a kind of a symbol of the ethnicity. So that's why that issue comes up to the forefront more than you would ideally like it to be, or I would indeed like it to be. I don't know how this explanation sounds to you, but maybe let's pick up some other opinions. You wanted to add something, Joanna? Please go ahead. You wanted to add something, Joanna? Please go ahead.
I think because of what you're saying and the language issues, which I acknowledge was difficult, but we reinforce it. There are other ways of saying it, and we've had the problems with the language issues as well, but we've always managed to treat them as second or third level issues because they were part of training journalists. We didn't put them as the top one, that we want Serbs, we want Albanians, we wanted journalists, and we'd say things like translation will be provided.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody like to pick up the points that Joanna has raised, or indeed raise any other points? I see that the chat is not very popular, but
I'll make it just
okay, Ian, I mean, as I said, and Boyd, you're next.
Okay. Well, let me just address Joanna's point about what we've tried to do throughout not just the media partnership, but many of our initiatives in the course of the implementation of ALVED is to focus on these civic notions. Now, the divides in the media space in Kosovo are very real, partly because of language, but also partly because of geography or you know, an unwillingness of certain communities to open themselves up to information from other sources or other communities, and you know, taking information that reinforces the prevailing view of the world that they have. And so we approached this with a view of trying to, and I think I mentioned in my introduction, you know, that one of the outcomes of this has been that, you know, minorities have enjoyed more information about the work of local governments that they otherwise would not have had. The priorities of minority communities, a lack of understanding about which has fueled grievance, has increased. More information about what is driving grievances within minority communities. There were various communal issues. There are various issues that, you know, whichever community you're from, you face the same challenges in your day-to-day existence. And I think demonstrating that you face the same challenges and calling upon local governments to take tangible steps. I mean, the work that we were doing on the local governance level through participatory social services planning was about bringing people together, regardless of their backgrounds, to understand the gaps in service provision in different municipalities in places like Leposavic or Lipjan, and et cetera, and to work together to try to fill those gaps, to work in partnership with local governments. And I think having information about these deficiencies, or the good things that local governments are doing at the local level, is key to driving that civic conception of what it means to be a citizen of Kosovo, not if you're a Serb or an Albanian or a Turk or a Bosniak, but somebody who lives within a certain municipality and has certain demands, and the municipalities have certain obligations. And the media, I think, is a vital component of that in terms of raising awareness and understanding. So it's not that we are trying to reinforce the you know, the use of these ethnically prescribed terms. But we, you know, and as I said, it was Darko who took the lead in terms of understanding which, you know, identifying which partners he felt he could benefit from to expand the coverage of Radio Garajdovac for the benefit of his audience. So this wasn't prescribed from the outset by ourselves. And I think, you know, one thing that needs to be addressed is how well do we understand the audiences? And I know that, you know, media is partly about shaping the audience and what they want to read, but also partly about understanding. And I think, you know, some of the other donors on this call will have something to say about, you know, the British Council have been doing work on how do you open up the editorial rooms to the communities so that the editors better understand what the communities want to hear. Part of it is data analytics, but a lot of it is much more simple. It's about talking to people. So as I said, the intention was never to try to reinforce these you know, but I think, you know, the divisions in the media space are very real and very problematic and do fuel grievances. And you know, this model and the way that Darko approached it has helped, I think, bridge some of those. And so now the question that I think is important is how we can take that work forward. In terms of your second question, there are some statistics in terms of what was redistributed. 47 items were tracked to have been redistributed by other media outlets. I don't have a breakdown of what those were in particular, but we can get them to you if you're interested in understanding what was redistributed and why. We'll dig those out because we have all the spreadsheets and data. Cool. Thank you, Ian. Boyd, you wanted the word.
Yes. Firstly, can you hear me?
Yes, we can very well indeed.
Okay. Look, so thanks a lot for this morning's discussion. I've worked with the EU previously. Those that don't know me, most recently, I've co-founded what's called the Barabar Center in Pristina. And that is giving a voice. We're talking about giving voices to different groups, gives a voice to underrepresented. It's an inter-community hub, and it takes up a lot of the questions that you've been dealing with today. One of the things that was said was that COSEF and COHA, you know, at the highest level, you know, are forming partnerships, which is really great. But at the lower level, it seems to be a little bit more difficult. And I would maybe ask the question, you know, is there really a clear willingness to work together? because if we are talking about the creation of professions and building journalists, reporting, in my view, it does not necessarily need to aim at a shared common view about anything. All it has to really do is to make sure that it's ethical and fact-based. In this regard, while everyone with a voice should make efforts to minimize disparities, political reconciliation, and that's the sort of the ceiling which we haven't really broken through yet in Kosovo. It's the political reconciliation, and that has not filtered through to the local level. There's so many great things happening at the local level, which I think the ALVED program highlighted. But one of the the main word in the ALVED program was amplification, amplifying, and those stories have yet really to make it to the mainstream media. And I think this is where the politicians, when it comes down to it, the emphasis is on holding all of them to account, because the messages coming from both sides can be very divisive, and that can really frustrate people who really want to be in the profession of a journalism, but they're frightened. They can be frightened to do things, to actually work with the other side, So maybe, of course, it's I think the project probably did provide more information to communities, and that's a really great thing. That's true. But there's still a hell of a long way to go. And I think it really, that gap between the community level and the political level has yet to be bridged. Even though, what Julieta said about USAID bridging divides, we're all trying to do that, but I think the reality is we skirt around the reality is quite a lot.
Well, the reality is not all that pleasant. Let's put it that way. I mean, you mentioned, I'd raise 2 points from what you said. One is, and I will ask Darko to prepare himself to answer this question, how much of a readiness is there amongst the media to actually go into this kind of a cooperation? So Darko, that's my next question for you. And Boyd, if I may also point out that the media are not immune to the general political situation. Let us not forget that precisely during this cooperation, we've seen a worsening of the political situation and polarization within the Kosovo society. And the media cannot simply pretend as if they're living in some kind of a space outside the space where they're living in. So they have to address, and yes, fear might be an element there as well. But Darko, how much of a readiness did you find as you were seeking the partners? And also, I know that you're very active in the media field of the whole of Kosovo. How much of a readiness do you see in potential media partners to engage in an activity like the kind that you were engaged with your partners?
Thanks, Nenad. I definitely agree to all coalition and cooperation is most important. Like Koha and Kosovo, it's very important in that is big media, big coalition. And also I will mention the coalition with the Serbian language media is very, very important for the production of credible news and for provide information for communities. Also, we have other collaboration like coalition with Radio Kim and Kosev, Contact Plus, Radio Mitrovica North. That is most important coalition. For that coalition based on local level in region Prizren and Peć is definitely turned out to be a very, very good and healthy idea. In Kosovo, you have many different projects in which media organization cooperate, but especially on local level, it's very rare for media from different communities to produce joint media content, like public service, like for me is very interesting last topic about how many books divide people and how split. And sometimes is not easy to find very good partners. In our coalition, at the beginning, not promise too much, but I mentioned now we produce joint content. That is most important, and not so many the same coalition. Also, how to be difficult to find partners in a very negative narrative at the political level is send strong message to age community to not cooperate, but local media and media coalition have a very important rules in that way.
Thank you very much. I think you made an important point now, Darko, which is that cooperation of this kind across the ethnic and linguistic divide is actually a strong message that is being sent out to the audience, but also to the political sphere. Can I ask maybe now Ariana and Julieta? Ariana, maybe you first. How easy, since the EU is involved with a number of media projects, how easy did you find it in your practice to actually arrange and find partnerships of this kind? Same question for you, Julieta, by the way. Ariana, please.
Thank you, Nenad. Actually, we have calls for proposals. Therefore, it is not that we as EU try to, let's say, convince different media outlets to apply that would fit, let's say, our plans or our scheme. Therefore, I would say that we try to talk to media, to journalists. We try to be on media, on social media to publicize, let's say, our calls, our opportunities, our funding opportunities. And then we receive applications from them.
So it's a more passive approach. It's a more passive approach.
In this regard, if you call it so, then yes. But the active approach is that I constantly meet media and journalists and tell them about our funding modalities. In these discussions that I have had, we then decided, from these discussions, actually, we then decided to include also private media, because normally we work with CSOs and we give grants to CSOs. But seeing the big need, including local media outlets that are registered as commercial businesses, we then changed something internally, and that would enable them, of course, to be partners in applications, but not as lead applicants.
Thank you, Julieta.
I think
please,
Lloyd had his hand up, so I don't know if...
I can't see the whole screen, but
okay.
Thank you very much for pointing it out. I've got only a certain number of faces on my
go
screen. Boyd, no, you go
but...
ahead, please, and Boyd will come up.
Okay, so I am going to share with you, just for everyone's information, the link to the IREX product that is
Excuse me, everybody, please, you can click, it's in the chat room, you can click on the link that Julieta has shown us.
And this is just because I heard people talking about the media situation in general in Kosovo and how it is, just when you have a spare time, if you want to look at it, because one of the points that was raised earlier was, you know, like, what do journalists report about or the situation? You know, it's all about politics. And this report as well points out that most of the reporting is around politics, and that is really unfortunate. So I hope that in next year and years to come, situation will change, where we will have more examples of what Radio Goraždevec is doing, and that is the natural partnerships, you know, something that is coming. I don't know how natural it was, but it was in a way to me, because it connected people from Peja region and Prizren region to talk about what matters to people, and that is very important regardless of ethnicity. And what is more important is joint production. And I don't see, and I haven't seen much of joint production that is done in a more natural way. Not something to be forced by donors, but something, you know, like there I still see this partnership more of a natural one because they are local partners, and they are followed, mostly by people from the region where they come from and that speak different languages and that want to know what their neighbors are doing. And this is very important. The partnerships we have came as well naturally. So, for example, our regional activity, this partnership I mentioned between Koha and Kosovo, is not something that we ask for it. The goal of the activity, the objective is totally something else, to help them, to equip them and give them tools to become more financially viable. And the partnership came spontaneous as a need, something that they saw that there is a need for the audience to know what's happening in the north, and for the audience in north of Kosovo, north municipalities to know what's going on in the rest of Kosovo and how the professional media reports about it. So it was not called, it wasn't a grant, there was not a call that they need to come together and develop this partnership.
Yeah, sort of, yes.
Yeah,
use the word natural. Yes, things which happen organically are of course more than welcome.
Yes.
In a way, that's exactly what happened with this project. It was basically a conversation between PCI and Darko Dimitrijevic, looking into, okay, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you'd like to do? And where is it that we can be of assistance? So this was as organic as it gets. Boyd, please go ahead. And if somebody's got a hand raised and I don't see you on my screen, please holler, shout, scream, something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks again. Look, so the donor always has an angle, so as much as we would like it sort of to be very organic, there's always sort of a hand over, and of course that's because of the financial as well, and what sort of politics A, B, or C wish to get across in Kosovo or Serbia, whatever. But one of the initial questions was, what was it? How international support can help, and of course, financially, it can be transformative for small media outlets, as we're talking about media here, and other grantees. And that can really change, in a number of months what they, are hoping to do. But, it's all very well for internationals, like say myself, whatever, talking about what should be done or whatever. But, people are vulnerable to messages from those in the power and that speak on their behalf. So the people, of course, should have a right and access to truthful information and not be manipulated. And of course, we then must ensure that the environment and the media, civil society can exercise their freedom. But even in the civil society currently in Kosovo are pitted against each other because of the sort of the vacuum in the northern politics and the sort of separation of discussion between the Pristina government and the Serbs as well. So and that has put the civil society in a very sort of tricky position where they were very willing to work together. I think previously, and will probably in the future as well, and still are in some sort of occasions. But people are vulnerable to these messages, and it's all very well for me to say, or for others to say, we're encouraging you to do this. But at the end of the day, we can walk away. It is you, people that are actually working day to day, that are vulnerable, to receiving even sort of maybe the wrong facts and then sending them out again. But that's at the easiest part. But sometimes you're under threat as well. You can be under threat, and we maybe as internationals don't appreciate that as much as maybe we should. And you obviously need to be very brave to be a journalist anyway, because you're going to get it in the neck a lot of the time from whoever, even locally. But
it comes with the job. We're used to that. You said at the very beginning, you said every donor has an angle, and yes, indeed. I mean, it would be illogical to expect the donors not to have an angle. I will take the naive assumption that the angle is to make the situation better than it is. But I see Ian was itching here to say something.
Just to address a couple of Boyd's points. Boyd, you're absolutely spot on, and I think if you read the final conclusion in the case study, it does look at the need for to broaden the scope and bring in issues that are considered taboo in different communities. If you look at what the joint piece is focused on, it's claiming assistance from social services, unfinished infrastructure projects, rises in prices for farmers, stray dogs, cost of heating, etc. I mean, these are all common issues that affect communities across Kosovo. Now, there tend to be two schools of thought about reconciliation. One is, my apologies. One is that you deal with the present, you try to breed empathy with people, between people, you show that they're citizens, they all face the same problems, we move forward together, and then we create a better environment in which to deal with the past. And then, of course, there are the purists who say we can't move forward until we dealt with the past. And I think finding a partnership and building a partnership that can start to address these contentious issues about remembrance and acknowledgement of guilt and memorialization, that's a next step, and that is much more challenging. And I think on your point about sensitivities, and maybe Darko can echo this, what we found through this work and our engagement with NGOs is, the sharing of those perspectives on grievance and what is sensitive within and between communities, even if you might not agree with it. I mean, things that are sensitive for one community, you might not understand why it is sensitive. But within the community, it resonates in a certain way. Take the issue, the issue of license plates that had a certain connotation in the north of Kosovo and a different connotation in Pristina. And you would have communities talking about that issue in different ways. In the north, it's a question of whether, can I drive my car? Whether you're sitting in Pristina, it's about, sovereignty and legality and having a, consistent license plate regime across the entire territory of Kosovo. So part of this partnership is also about trying to help people from different communities understand how communities think about particular issues. As I said, whether that grievance is legitimate or not, it's still what is the perception at the local level. Whether there's a sense that such partnerships can make journalists feel more courageous about the topics they approach, I'm not sure, because I haven't seen it within civil society. I haven't seen civil society standing up when particular members of civil society are being targeted for their stance on, Kosovo status or transitional justice questions. So there is a little bit of I'm a bit skeptical as to whether such media partnerships or such partnerships, that's not the purpose, in fact. It would be a wonderful side effect that it, created this sense of solidarity, but it's not the overriding purchase. In terms of, one thing I didn't emphasize, and I'm not emphasizing it just because the donor is on the call, this was an extremely cost-effective approach. This initiative was, less than 20,000 euros. And I think in terms of the amount of content creation and elements of sustainability, I think it is, it takes a lot of, there's a lot of sort of virtues on that front. So you're right, the donor has a say. Although no, I mean, we had a lot of leeway to pursue this media partnership. It was something that we identified, and it's something that Darko took forward. And I think that's why I commended not just the UK government's support, but also the way in which they supported this project. It allowed us to test things, and as a result, I think we tried to be honest in the case study and concede where things didn't work. I've read lots of reports about projects where nothing went wrong. So I hope we've been fairly honest about things that could have been done differently.
Let's use the opportunity and ask Richard Levay, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Yes, you are. Wonderful. So since Ian mentioned the donor, let me go back to you and say this case study, the partnership that has been achieved and that is continuing to go on, is that going to inspire your embassy as a donor to engage more in activity in sort of partnerships of this kind? Do you see it as a good way of moving the whole society forward, not just the media?
Yes, I think so. I think it's certainly triggered.
I'm not asking for a commitment. I'm just an opinion.
Yeah, I think, as I said in the opening, it certainly made me reflect a bit more on, I think in the 3 years I've now been here, on the overlap between our reconciliation team who, led on the project, on the ALVED project, and some of our wider work. And I've, the longer I'm here, the more I spot more and more opportunities. I think at the moment we're looking at potentially doing some work on peace journalism, building on the Northern Ireland example, things like that. So there's a few. I think we're looking more and more about how support for media and these issues should be brought together, and how one can help the other. So it's certainly something we're looking at.
Thank you. Darko, can I ask you, and please, I would also like to ask somebody else from the media to also, after Darko, respond to the same question. A number of people here have praised the fact that with a very modest sum of money, under 20,000 can be considered a very modest grant, a lot has been achieved. Darko, with double the money or treble the money, would you be able to achieve 2 times more or 3 times more than what you have? Is it realistic? Sometimes more money is not the solution, but that's the question for you, and I'll be grateful for anybody else from the Kosovo media to respond to this question.
Providing fund is important for creating a very successful activity, but in our case, money is not on first place in our work. For example, that coalition survived after the finish supporting through the ALVED project, and I am optimistic in a long-term way because we sometimes meet jointly, try to planning develop this coalition, and I mean that is important. I don't very clear for double funding. We don't have any experience in that way. We not so much big NGO and media NGO. We have 10 employers, and every project be supported by different donors. We don't have any experience in that way.
Okay, this was a theoretical question anyway. Practice does not show that throwing twice as much money will give you twice as many results. That's no matter what the field. Yes.
And also, I like to mention we have a lot of cases where we work most year in the past without money. For example, we have a Kosovo Media Association network who is a lot of time be in voluntary base and be very visible in Serbian community because that is have central news broadcasting by 4 radio station in Kosovo wide. That is sometimes good way to you see any objective aims in your work.
Thank you. We've got about 6-7 more minutes for the discussion itself before we go into a wrap-up and the final words by the speakers. But can I now try and urge some of the people who've been attending but not taking part so far? Would somebody who's not spoken yet like to comment, ask a question? I see a number of faces here. Vladan, are you trying to say something, Vladan Trific? Unmute, please. Unmute.
So
there you
my
go.
internet connection got disrupted. My internet connection got disrupted, so I was changing internet provider. That's why I was a little bit maybe looking confused.
I thought you wanted to say something.
Last 5 minutes I didn't heard anything. That's why I was changing my internet provider.
Is there anything you would like to comment on, or a question that you would like to put to somebody? No, you're muted once again. You muted yourself.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear about this kind of coalition, and I think that this is a good thing, and this should be expanded more in Kosovo. Especially because I follow this closely. I follow closely cooperation of Kosovo and Koha. I see a great value in that. Very often we have, as maybe Ian mentioned previously, we have that one event which is rather clear to everybody, is described in two different medias and two different languages on two completely different ways, and this is not good, by my humble opinion. I also greatly support Darko's initiative with his colleagues, what he is doing about fake news, and that is very well monitored, and we are following these articles often. And in some of my examples and some of my work, actually, when I lecture something, I give these examples which Darko prepares for me nicely, and I just use them as a way how journalists should not work. Now, always there is room for improvement.
There is indeed. There is indeed. Yeah. Anybody else who would like to use the opportunity? Sorry, Vladan, I thought you'd finished. My apologies.
Yeah. Okay. It's internet. My internet is.
Yes, we can see you're sort of coming and going. Anybody else who has? Yes, please, Marta Onorato.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the director of IRI, the International Republican Institute, and I was really happy to hear about the experiences that you have shared. I think it's a great initiative. As IRI, Lulieta mentioned several projects funded by USAID, but she forgot one that I think it's, although it's not focused solely on media, involve also youth from the media sector. And this is a program implemented at the regional level by IRI in partnership with Kosovo Center for Security Studies and peer educator networks in Kosovo, but also regionally in Serbia and Bosnia-Herzegovina. And the aim was to establish a network of youth coming from different sectors, including from the media sector. And I think this was very successful because often during the conversation this morning, amplifying voices, but also the need for the media to work within their society, understanding different perspectives. Was mentioned, and this was exactly what we managed to do in the network in a little more than 1 year of program implementation now. We have 20 youth coming from different communities in Kosovo, 20 from Serbia, 20 from Bosnia-Herzegovina. They are meeting on a monthly basis, sharing the different perspectives, dealing also with what...
Marta, forgive me for interrupting you. What you just described now, how much of a media echo is it getting? What the achievements that you're talking about, are they actually being amplified? Are they being presented in the media?
Just in social media. This was what happened, and we decided to use for the time being only social media, because also there is a certain level of sensitivities. So there were not articles drafted on it. This is the first year. We will start a new year.
A new cycle.
A new cycle in March with a new group of 60 people. I think that we haven't discussed with the donor yet on the level of publicity to be done through media or media outlet, but I think that at least this has had an impact, not only in the group of people that have dealt with taboo issues also, and this was the biggest challenge, because it's not all talking about common issues, but it's also understanding how to talk about issues that normally divide. And that's what we tried to do. And as media was also there, people from the media sector, I think that this gave also to these youth that would be involved in media a different perspective to deal with sensitive issues, taking into consideration also the difficulties of other communities and other states when reporting in their profession.
But that's a given, whether we like it or not. Thank you very much. We're nearing the end now. Each of the speakers will have 1 minute to give their closing statements. But before that, I'd like to ask ALVED's project director, Anthony Foreman, who's observing, watching, and making notes during this discussion, to give us a wrap-up and to tell us what are the lessons learned for PCI from this discussion, and how can all this take us one step forward. Anthony.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for giving your time. I think one of the things that we always have to ask, if we ask people to give their time, we really have to reflect deeply. Are we saying something new? Because I think, you know, just by attending here, we've got an audience of people who, by definition, know that it's important to support media, that know that it's important to support reconciliation, that know, you know, about the specific issues, and about the disinformation, about the less politicized and more human interest kind of angles, and why all of these things are important. But if there is something that that we're trying to really bring up as being new, then it would be this. And I think it's in the spirit of the intervention from Joanna Hansen, which is the importance of reflecting to what extent you are creating something artificially, as opposed to nurturing something that is already important and is a you know, almost existential priority to the people who are working on these issues. So, you know, and we also need to reflect, you know, by focusing on ethnicity, are we actually hardening the lines rather, you know, and therefore having the inverse effect from what we want. Boyd said, I think, quite usefully, that the donor has an angle, but even before you come to an angle, the donor has to work through projects, and working through a project is kind of an angle in its own way. It's always, you know, finite. It's got to start, it's got to finish, it's got a budget, and even if it tries to be flexible, you know, it's likely to have subject matter, and that you know, leads to a certain type of way of working. What we've tried to do here is to really offer up some suggestions about how you can support local media and how you can nurture partnerships without forcing things, and really allowing them to do what they want to do. And then you can evaluate the results, and, you know, whether or not what you have is what you wanted. So, you know, just going to Nenad's little quip, you know, I'm a journalist, and that's before ethnicity. I mean, is that cross-cutting? I think this case study shows that it is that you have people in these media organizations for whom the most important thing is this journalistic integrity and the sustainability of their businesses. And that, you know, we spoke at the beginning that the symbolism of this inter-ethnic cooperation is very important, and it can be a good example. But actually, it's more than that. In actual fact, there's a real value to each of these organizations by being together, by being able to cover more things, being able to cover them from different angles, by carrying each other and reaching more people. This is a fundamental business interest. I think the other thing that this this case study. Hopefully, if you haven't read it already, more people will read it. Shows that they are interested in development. So for all of the donor organizations who are out there, they're interested in how development works and what is happening. They're interested in everything that's happening in their own community, and they should be regarded as natural partners. And what needs to be emphasized, and I think, you know, Darko didn't quite say it, he almost said the opposite, but local media is in a very, very difficult position. And that is why, you know, a lot of them then re-register or set themselves up as NGOs, and especially for minority media, but not only minority language media, is because the media market is not there. But the media is an essential thing for democratic development. It has to exist, okay? And if there isn't a media market, then, you know, we have to think about how we can help in other ways. Now, if it's not projects, what could it be? There's mentioned in our case study that there was something called a media consultation dialogue, where we regularly brought people from all different parts of the media together to talk about it. And I thought an interesting thing that came up was idea of, you know, any development project, 2% to the local media. You know, whatever your project is, you know, if you're working in this, and that they should be looked at as allies. And the problem sometimes with projects is that it might look at media as a very specialist thing, or almost like a service provider. It's like, we want a certain number of stories written about this, you know, and so we will bring in a media partner, and they will have this much money, and they have to write this many stories. And I think, you know, he was perhaps over-optimistic about the cost effectiveness. You know, 20,000, a bit less, was what the partners got. It cost more also for us to manage it and to monitor it and all of this sort of thing. We can't forget all that. But, you know, it really did produce a lot of stories which reached both communities and so on. And it was authentic. They wrote about what they know about their own communities and what they're interested in. Pushing back a little bit on Joanna's point about do we overemphasize ethnicity? Well, we can see that perhaps journalists see each other first as journalists, but their readers aren't journalists, right? So their readers are interested in different things, and we know that the minority communities are interested in the, you know, how are things going to improve for them, you know? We saw, I think it's mentioned in the actual case study, that there's almost a specialization in Radio Goraždevac, that they tended to write more about cultural things, art, culture, and all of these things that, you know, their readership could be involved in, whereas Radio Peja, which is the majority community, had really much more information about what the local government was doing. You know, so this partnership kind of bridged that to a certain extent. It doesn't solve everything, but you can see that, you know, they're living in the same area, and they just have a natural interest because that's their everyday experience. And one of the interests, the extent to which partnerships like this can bridge that. Very final thing I would say is, you know, the results are not automatic. I think Boyd made that point very well. You know, we've been trying lots and lots of things for a very long time. The political environment can, you know, dominate everything, and it can destroy lots of things, like relationships that have been built over years and years and years could just go back to nothing just because of a tweet or something. That might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too much. The issue about, you know, whether these partnerships can deal with some of the real drivers of conflict, the sensitive issues, and what does that say about, you know, the danger that journalists are prepared to put themselves in? Well, you know, we don't want to put anybody in danger. And again, I think by creating an authentic environment in which they cooperate, they can choose to make those cases by themselves, you know, rather than being telling you have to write about this, you have to write about that. Those are choices that they can make for themselves. And I suppose what's, you know, it didn't happen in this project, and I think the area where it's possible to work on is that it didn't happen because of internal conflict avoidance strategies and a kind of self-censorship. And sometimes self-censorship can be worse than actual censorship because you don't know where the lines are. You know, if there's a censor, they can tell you, you can say this, you can't say that, and you know, and you can push it yourself. If it's self-censorship, is that you're sort of naturally responsive to each other's feelings, and you say, well, let's not ask them about this, you know, we know it's sensitive for them, and then it never comes up. And so I think we're also making the case here for sustained partnerships, you know, the ones that allow people to build working practices over an amount of time, and then eventually people can say, you know, what's really important to my community, and you never write about it. You know, what do you think about this? You know, and that we hope, we can't prove it, that doesn't come out, but that's certainly where we see it going next from our learning of this. Very finally, thank you very much, Joanna, for your interest in the wider data about monitoring. I think it's also worth saying, you know, that Darko and his team did a really great job of monitoring what they were doing as to, you know, how they prepared things and who did what. And we had a lot of stuff, and we went through it. And I thought I would never have to look at it again after the case study was written, but I'm very happy to go back to it and just kind of share that information about who else picked up the stories, because that is actually a very interesting angle as to what sort of things that they're opening. It asks questions, you know, to what extent is there a utilitarian approach, you know, or what themes are interested in. That didn't actually make it. That didn't make it, but there are other things which we didn't have a chance to discuss, and I hope people will read it.
There always are. Thank you very much, Anthony, for a very comprehensive approach. And yes, I agree. Self-censorship is much worse than external censorship, because external censorship simply comes from above, and the internal self-censorship corrupts from within. That's always much worse. We're overrunning a bit on the time, but I hope you don't mind. If I can ask now Ariana, Darko, and Julieta for a very, very short 1 minute sort of closing statement, sort of wrapping up maybe, or saying something that you wish you had said earlier but didn't have a chance. Let's go the other way around. So Ariana first, Julieta second, and Darko last.
Okay, thank you, Nenad. Thank you, everyone, for your points. An interesting discussion. I do not have anything to add at this point, but I would love to have heard a little bit of more, let's say, about different perspectives from the media, from journalists. I don't know who is present right now here in the call or not, but I would have loved to hear more about them, and to hear feedback about what, for example, these media that were part of the partnerships, what would they have wanted to go differently from the donor's point of view, so that we can feed a little bit our practices here at our office as well, in case we would want to go forward with this initiative as well. But the discussion does not end here. As I said, I'm open for discussions even later on. So please, anyone that is interested for our grants or our initiatives, feel free to reach me out, but I would also love to have an open door when I would want more information on this.
It's a two-way process. Ariana, pick up Darko's telephone number, speak to Darko, speak to his partners, and go and visit them as soon as possible. Okay, Julieta?
Sorry, I need to say something before I forget, because I didn't mention IRI's activity. We have so many other activities, and this goes with the point about donors do, and how we strategically, I don't know what's the term right now, but you know, like focus our funding into. And I'm not the person, I'm just a project manager. So there are other people that think about this. It's many people that do assessments, that help us write strategies and all of that. And yes, donors always have the best in their mind and intention when they do their projects. So it's not just IRI, it's just not NDI, it's not BMAP Forward Internews. We have so many other activities. As I said at the beginning, we really have intersectoral approach. And when we talk about media, it's complex. Are we talking about the sources of the news? Are we talking about journalists? Are we talking about outlets? And it's all of that combined. What is important is that the citizens are receiving the correct information, the fact-checked information. So we have other activities, and I would like just to let you know, just in case that there is someone else in the audience and feel that I didn't mention them, but we have activities that are focused on anti-corruption, and we train journalists through this activity on how to how to recognize.
Hopefully not how to corrupt, yeah.
No, sorry, this is me. I'm a so or the rule of law activities, and they are like trying to help citizens understand, become more legal literate, what's the know more about the justice system and all of that. So it's through different activities. Approach is different. Sometimes the journalists are trained, sometimes we support media outlets, and sometimes we introduce the news.
Let us not forget
like
media. And let us not forget media literacy is another important, angle.
So
thank you very much, Julieta. Thank you, Darko. You're going to be closing this meeting, so say something big and important.
Yes, thank you again for opportunity to speaking today. I like to say at the time when young generation have communication through TikTok, Instagram, especially with short video clips. We have also media that is mostly sensational content, title stories. We need to make much efforts to learn, especially young journalists, to learn media, how to address problem that is crucial for society. The job of media is not just publishing and have a lot of number of content. We need quality. We need to learn how to addressing problem. In this project, we learn our audience, and audience recognize us like address where go to show what is problem, and we cover this topic, and after that we addressing to municipality and other institution. We have
serving the community, in other words. Yes,
absolutely, that is public service, and we need to have much efforts in that way to support people to learning to address problem.
Thank you very much, Darko. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know, Ian, as project manager, was there anything else you would like to sort of add? But let's try and keep it compact.
Thank you for your interventions, particularly Joanna and Boyd. We have more case studies coming in the future on the census I mentioned, on civil society cooperation. So please, if you're interested, you found this useful and engaging, then you can sign up on our website for our mailing list.